Siwan, thank you hugely for being with us today. Thank you for both performances this morning. Well, it's time just before 20 past 10 now to meet my next guest, Barbara Hannigan. As a soprano, she's an inspirer of composers all over the world to write for and collaborate with her voice. As a conductor, she's a creator of programmes like the one she's leading with the London Symphony Orchestra next week that create connections between Albert Roussel and Benjamin Britten and Joseph Haydn and make Claude Vivier rhyme with Bartók and Sibelius. And on those programmes, Barbara Hannigan isn't only singer and conductor, she's doing both at the same time, making a synergy between her voice, her gestures and the musicians on stage that's frankly one of the miracles of today's musical life. How does she do it all? And there's even more to that all, by the way, in the Equilibrium programme for young artists that Barbara Hannigan runs, and the small matter of her taking over as chief conductor of the Iceland Symphony Orchestra next year. But when I spoke to her, Barbara Hannigan had the London Symphony Orchestra, Haydn symphonies and Britten's song cycle Les Illuminations on her mind. Barbara, thank you so much for being with us, not least in the middle of an involved schedule. But it's partly one of the great mysteries of you is the sense of how these things work. The singing and the conducting together, they're miraculous, they're incredible when they happen. What it makes me think is, how on earth do you do that in a rehearsal when you have to perform with the orchestra whilst you're thinking about balance, you're thinking about all of the things that would happen when you're performing your vocal line, but you're having to do everything else at the same time. Just how many dimensions does your brain have to be in?
There is a certain element of splitting the brain in this kind of work. And it really takes place in the rehearsals and what decisions we made about who needed what, as far as gesture, as far as the various levels of contact that we have. I mean, I find a performance successful as a sing-conduct when I'm hardly conducting, actually. And the audience, of course, doesn't see the first day of rehearsal when I'm facing the orchestra and I really have them with me in my hands. And then as the rehearsals go on, even within the first day, less and less and less happens from my side. And they take on much more responsibility and understanding, so that by the time we get to the performance, hopefully, it looks like something very natural, actually. It looks like big chamber music, you know?
Yeah, and often conductors have used that phrase in the past about big chamber music. And
oh, yeah.
I don't mean it's taken with a pinch of salt from my side. What I mean by it is, though, that there are moments when, you know, if it's Mahler 4, another piece you conducted with the London Symphony Orchestra, well, you know, there are things that are just a bit different. If you know, the relationship between the back desk of the seconds and the trombones, you know, there are things, coordination, which, okay, they're chamber music, but it's kind of hard to fathom what that might be. But what you've just described is a sense of the orchestra absolutely having to go on a journey with you to take responsibility for themselves, for each other, for you, in a way which really is chamber music-like in terms of listening.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And next week with London Symphony Orchestra and the week after, we'll have Les Illuminations, which is string orchestra and voice. So it's maybe, in a way, the most, let's say, quote-unquote, easy one of the three pieces that I'm going to be singing. Then we have a really big orchestral work, Luonnotar, of Sibelius, where the orchestra is big. And I'm very curious because I've kind of developed a new way that I'd like to try doing this piece. I'll see if it works. If anybody can do...
What is that?
Well, it's to do almost, is really to not conduct. So we'll see what happens. If anybody can do it, London Symphony can do it, you know? And then we have the Golfam Khayyam piece, Je ne suis pas une fable à conter. I am not a tale to be told, in which the orchestra has to improvise and individually improvise. You know, each person has the liberty to take cells of material and choose within those cells of material what they will play and when they will play it. And they also have the liberty to choose silence. I mean, the piece exists on various metaphors from this wonderful Iranian composer. She is based in Tehran. So I'm very excited about the process of working that we're going to have in the next 2 weeks. And then, of course, we have the pieces that I'm going to quote unquote just conduct, which are not like child's play, you know, Bartok, Miraculous Mandarin Suite, yeah. Haydn 104, Haydn 39, you know, it's a lot of really fabulous repertoire. And I think we're going to be using every single corner of our brains and hearts in the next 2 weeks.
In terms of preparation, Barbara, I'm really fascinated by something you say about how you prepare the parts of Haydn symphonies. Before the rehearsal, you're starting from a place that I've observed many rehearsals get to at the end,
right.
which is to say, people agreeing what bowing to do,
right.
people agreeing what articulation there should
right.
be, people agreeing how the phrases should be calibrated. All of that is meticulously done by you in advance, Barbara?
Yes, because I really don't think it's possible to get to the level of detail that one would want if one doesn't arrive with prepared parts, which are the beginning roadmap for where we will go, of course. So what I do every time I'm doing a new Haydn symphony, I buy, of course, the score, and then I buy an entire set of parts. I decide on how I imagined the piece would work, you know, in my feeling about this work and all the accents, all the slurs, the phrasing, the bowings. And I work with my librarian, who is also a violinist, to prepare bowings that should work. And then those parts are sent a month in advance or more to the orchestra, to the players. So when we begin, they have a very clear idea once we've run the piece once. Okay, this is what she wants. And within that roadmap, of course, every orchestra is going to slightly say, well, can we change this bowing? Can we do a down bow here and an up bow here? Because for us, it works a little bit better. And so we're starting from a place of collaboration we will be able to manage in 2 days to get to the performance with a level of detail that for me makes the most sense.
You know, you hear that on record, in that amazing record of the Grisey Quatre Chants pour franchir le seuil and the Nono and the Haydn 49. With the players of Ludwig. I mean, detail is one thing, but, you know, as you've suggested in terms of how performances feel, the feeling here is freedom, you know, in the playing, whether it's the ache of that long adagio or frankly the terror of the fast movements that you, of course it's Haydn, but it's in your performance with them. You know, that's what you make. There's a savagery there. Yeah,
I think in 49, I think in the Sturm und Drang symphonies, we'll be doing 39 in the second week in London. I mean, it is quite savage, I think, in the way he uses syncopation and the raw emotions. And also, you know, I'm always looking for, okay, who has the primary voice? Who is the secondary voice? And then what musicians are supporting that? And so in a way, I kind of treat the first Viennese school the way that I treat the second Viennese school, which is Schoenberg, Berg, and Weber.
Right, so you mean in the second Viennese schools the Hauptstimmen und Nebenstimmen.
Exactly, primary voice, secondary voice.
So exactly. The idea of, when you say that's there, I mean, you know, in a sense it's an advanced version of melody and accompaniment.
Yeah, who's talking to whom?
I think the hardest thing I feel for conductors to do is to breathe properly. And maybe that's something where you automatically, because of all your experience in breathing for a living, that actually that connection is underneath all of this. And okay, breaths can be short staccato. They can be huge long lines like in Lawanatar, like in Mahler symphonies, or they can be short breaths as in Haydn or Bartok or Stravinsky. Is that something that consciously you're allowing to happen? You can see it, for those of us lucky enough to have seen you conduct, in your gestures, invitations, places where you feel that you're breathing with the ensemble.
Well, hopefully I'm always breathing with them. And I really work on my breathing every day. And I work on my breathing like ballerinas work on tendu. So before I start singing, I'm working on breathing exercises. And I'm consciously trying to make sure that my center of gravity is quite low, so that I'm breathing kind of like anybody that does yoga, that you're breathing quite low in the body. So anything that has to do with upper chest or, neck or chest, that's contingency air, but that doesn't have anything to do with real breath and real support. And when my center of gravity is anchored, that resonates with the orchestra.
So in other words, you can feel that physically as a thing that happens.
Yes, and they can feel it. I remember when I first was starting conducting, and I was working with the wonderful orchestra in Rome, Santa Cecilia, and we were working on a piece, and the first performance was absolutely wonderful. And the second performance, it wasn't as good, especially the Pizzicati. And I knew it had something to do with me. And I asked the principal cello, Luigi, who's just a wonderful guy, Luigi, help me out here. Why didn't it go as well tonight? And, I was so green. And he said, Barbara, your breath was higher. You were breathing higher. And we didn't feel it the same, and we didn't know where to play. And I thought, oh, what a generous advice from him. He helped me so much. So I work so hard at that. I try to make sure that I'm aware of that. And of course, you're in a constant state of success and a constant state of failure. And you just come back every day and you put your attention where you need to put your attention.
What you just described is like a resonance between very specific physicality, your physicality, and a direct correlation with musical results in the orchestra and that bigger body of the orchestra. What though is the feeling of embodiment for you? You've spoken about how singing has little or not much to do with the larynx or physically, that's one part of it, but it's your whole body and your whole soul.
Yes.
Is that true for conducting too, or are you feeling that energy in the same way?
I think it's true for me as a conductor. I think the expression of the corpus, the whole being, I feel the soul and the state of the soul, the energy, it's all one thing all the time. So it is something that I think that reads, and that's why, one connects with one group of musicians and sometimes it doesn't connect, and that's okay. That's just the way things can be. No,
Barbara, thank you hugely. I also want to say that there's important involvement of the Equilibrium artists doing in your relationship with the London Symphony Orchestra at the moment, on stage and assisting in these programs as well. They're somehow always with you, whether or not they're directly on stage in the performances. Yeah,
it's really exciting for me to follow what the various EQ artists and EQ alumni are doing now. I look at someone like Fleur Barron, who sang with London Symphony and I last season, and she just won a Grammy. And there's so many of them that are doing really, really well. And I always take a young conductor, an assistant conductor on the road with me for every engagement that I do. I'm very excited that in London I'll have Luis Castillo-Briceño, who will be with me for the first week, and Charlotte Cordroy, fabulous British conductor, for the second week, who assisted me on an EQ production last year and who I met at the Royal Academy, actually. And now she's making her own career. So it's fulfilling, and I think it's a wonderful obligation for all of us to mentor our younger colleagues and to transmit what we can to them, to share our experiences with them.